Thanks for listening to WBCA LP 102.9 FM Boston. Welcome back to another exciting episode of XP Hunter. Once again, I am your new frenemy, companion, and sometimes love interest. I think I want to be your love interest today. That's where we're going to start. Okay. Hi, lover. Welcome back. I missed you so much since you were here last time. Remember, here at XP Hunter, we are juxtaposing life with video games because they are not so different from how we live our lives. The characters that we play are not so different from us. They have interests, they have vices, they have issues, and that is why we love them. We are going to dive a little bit into comics. And so I think a lot of people are still struggling with the connotation that comics are literature, kind of, but not really. Me personally, I think that comic books are literature. If you've ever picked up a graphic novel, as they like to be called nowadays, or a comic, and let's say you take the Superman serial, we're not going to go all the way back to the beginning because, retcons and changes and new writers, but let's just say, man, this is a little hard. Okay, so let's say we're just going to take everything from like the New 52 onwards, even though I hate the New 52, it sucks. But if you take everything from the New 52 onwards about Superman and you put it together, it would be one giant book. Mind you, Superman's history goes back to like the 1930s. So he has a very long and full, rich backstory and, side stories where he's making appearances with Batman and Green Lantern and Green Arrow and everyone else. So the thing about it is it's not so short-sighted, but I want to talk about the dark side of all things. And I think a lot of people don't realize that most medium that we create as people, whether it's art, whether it's comics, whether it's video games, it really reflects who we are as people, not only individuals, but societies, cultures, and the world in general, right? We're going to be focused on comic books, but the first idea that comes to mind is, I think it's Red something. It's a movie that was remade not recently, a couple of years ago, and Liam Hemsworth, was the main character. And in the new version that came out a couple of years ago, the bad guy was North Korea, whereas in the original, the bad guy was Russia because, we used to have issues with Russia, and now, we still have issues with Russia, but now we have issues with North Korea, and so now they are the bad guy, right? They could have still made it Russia, but it was more poignant for people now for the bad guy to be North Korea. So the same things happen in comic books, and so we're going to just be talking about the things that are left in the gutter. And if you don't know, in comic books are drawn in panels. And so it can be in any kind of amalgam. It could be 3 long rectangular panels that are set on one page, or it could be 3 rows of 3 rectangular panels set on one page. But the gutter is the space that is between the panels. So let's say Superman is meeting Lois Lane. So the first panel would be, let's say, Superman over, he's flying through the sky, right? So the background's blue, and then you have Superman. And the next panel next to it, you have Superman about to land on a patio in the city. And then the next one is Lois Lane coming out onto said patio. So the thing is, there's information in between those panels that we subconsciously interject, right? So we know that Superman was flying, so we don't know how far he flew, but he flew a little bit more than he was landing on her patio, and she heard him, and so then she showed up, right? Those are the things that happened in between those 3 panels. And so what I mean when I said there's a lot of darkness hidden in the gutter is that there are a lot of messages and undertones in comic books that a lot of people kind of ignore, I'll say, or it's just not as impactful because someone's not saying it to them, right? And this also goes into how people communicate with each other, even in real life, like face to face, or a lot of times, internet post to internet post. And so the thing is that it's one thing for someone to come out and say, oh, I think that you're very ugly, right? And then it's another thing entirely for someone to pay you a backhanded compliment. Like, oh my goodness, like your hair is amazing. Too bad that, you couldn't, get your face to do the same, right? Like they're paying you a quote unquote compliment, but there's like shade in there, right? Because they're still saying that your face can't match how nice your hair looks. And I think that a lot of times in comic books, I think do it very well. Video games as well, but comic books definitely so, because it kind of leads you to make interpretations and decisions for yourself rather than them telling you. And I know a lot of movies and even some video games kind of end like, oh, make your own decision. And I really don't like that, because in a lot of those forms of media, they have already been telling you this is, up is up, down is down, left is left, right is right, BA start, like they're telling you what it is. This is how it is. And then at the end, they're like, well, make your own decision. That's just lazy writing. But in comic books, they are telling you up is up, down is down, left is left, right is right. But also, none of that stuff is true. There is always an option in comic books for you to understand and analyze information in a way that makes sense to you. And so that's why there's canon, right? And canon just means that it has been legitimized by the writers of the story, and then there's, headcanon, right? There's what you believe in your head just from the information that you've been given because it makes the most sense, right? So a lot of times across the board, but mostly in comic books because they are ever changing and they have a lot of turnover for writers and the like. And so they'll have characters like a lot of people don't know that the first Green Lantern, his powers are actually kind of tied to mysticism and magic rather than, the Green Lantern that came after him, Hal Jordan, where that whole, space police notion was created because at the time, magic and mysticism wasn't as interesting and that Green Lantern was selling poorly. And so they started doing stuff in space because people were super, super into that. And they won't tell you, like, there's a whole arc for Hal Jordan where he literally goes dark. He just, his entire city, Star City, gets Bayside. His entire city gets destroyed. And so he kind of goes on this bender where he's just like, he recreates the whole city using his Green Lantern ring, which is wrong. Or at least the Guardians of the Universe say it's wrong. I wouldn't particularly say it's wrong. I mean, he's going through some stuff, but everyone gets together. The new Green Lantern or another Green Lantern, John Stewart, and Batman, and a lot of the others come and are like, man, you got to stop this. You got to get yourself under control. And in between the panels, it's very easy to just follow the main storyline where it's like, well, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan has gone off the rails. We need to get him back on. If we can't get him back on, we have to, put him down, but in between it's like, there's a part in the comic where he's talking, quote unquote talking, because mind you, everyone in his city is dead. Everything's gone. It's been leveled. But he's, talking to his brother and they're just having this conversation about his parents. And you're listening to this conversation, but in between the panels, in the gutter, it's like, it's all this stuff that's still, even though his brother's gone, he's literally talking to himself. There's so much information that's still being left in the gutters, right? Information that you have to infer. It's like, well, why is he having this conversation with this projection of his brother rather than why didn't he have it with his brother? And we know he can't have it with him now, right? His brother's dead, but why hadn't he had it with him before? And if you're just reading it just for face value, you miss a lot in comic books. if you're actually looking deep, like why is he doing this? If you actually if you actually think about it, comics have such a rich literary value, because it's not just you taking information, it's you taking in that information and then analyzing it. And that's why I like reading comics. I like learning about people's backstories. I like learning about some, when they have elsewhere stories where they just go off and do really weird stuff. It's like, why do we have Batman by Gaslight? So it's like a steampunky Batman. It's like, why? But it's so interesting to see them in those situations. And I especially love it because of all the dark things that exist within comics. Just because I'm a big proponent of art imitating life. And when we create scary monsters or really, really bad guys, I feel like those characters really represent a dark part that exists in all of us. On the, less kind of, watching the world burn and eating babies side, on the more like not so crazy sad side, we've all had like the notion where someone asks you to do something and you're just like, no, right? That's a very innocuous version of it. But the thing is that thought inside of you that's saying, no, I don't want to do anything for you. Why can't you do it for yourself? I'm not your slave. That's the dark part of us, I'll say. And just because I say dark, I don't mean that it's evil or it's wrong, but it is a place or a thought inside of us that for the most part is going to do what's wrong for other people. Even though, we could win, we could have all around win, but we'd rather do what was just best for us and watch everyone else burn. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, why can't you help this person? Why can't you get them a small tea? It's only $1.25. It's not going to break the bank. You can do those things, but there's something inside of us that's always kind of pulling us back. That's saying, no, I should just look out for me. I shouldn't look out for you. You look out for yourself. And that's what I find the most interesting, because especially today, I think a lot of us, or a lot of societies, kind of shy away from it. It's kind of like, it doesn't really exist. We're better than that. We're civilized, and if you've ever read a comic, I mean, there are so many, a lot of the systems of government, societies, whatever you want to call them, they would consider themselves civilized, right? They're capable of space travel and they have superpowers. They can fly. And so having these abilities that for the most part usually are innate, right? Like Superman's a Kryptonian, and even though Kryptonians on Krypton can't fly and they don't have superpowers, when he grew up here exposed to a yellow sun, he developed those powers. But that was always genetically genetically predisposed to be able to do those things, right? He just happened that his species was developed on a planet that had a red sun, or just didn't have a yellow sun, and so the radiation they absorbed didn't amount to anything. But it was always going to happen, and so there are things about ourselves that we want to acknowledge, like Superman will acknowledge that, yeah, he's an alien. I'm sure for a long time, even sometimes now, he wishes he wasn't. He wishes he was human. I mean, he likes helping people, but I mean, I told someone, I was like, it'd be so cool to be a superhero. And they're like, do you know, you'd probably wake up in a cold sweat, because now you're not just worried about yourself. Now you feel like you have to help other people because you have this power. How could you keep it to yourself? And keeping it to yourself is selfish. And a lot more people will die because you do have this power and you haven't used it. But I digress. We can talk about that another time. And speaking of talking about it another time, don't forget, you can email me at xphunterlee@gmail.com if you want to just comment. We also are up on Pinterest and Instagram, Facebook TBD. Still thinking about it. But you can always, there will be challenges posted on the Instagram. There will be challenges posted on the Pinterest. If you want to participate, you can email me again, or you can also just, DM me on Instagram, and I will always make sure to try and, shout you out. hand out some XP, talk about who and how people completed challenges that we put on the website. And I will myself be going out on quests with companions and friends and frenemies out to do the challenges that I set for you guys. Also to, explore, gain that XP so that we can all level up. But getting back to all the dark things in the gutters, I think that I myself, I kind of just got into comics just because, recently Marvel has been coming out with all the movies for all their superheroes. Mind you, I didn't like, Avengers is really good, right? I didn't like Justice League Unlimited. That's the cartoon. I didn't like Justice League, the movie, because first of all, Cyborg is a good character, right? He's pretty cool. But like Martian Manhunter, that's where it's at. I don't really care about Cyborg. When given a choice between the two of them, I choose Martian Manhunter. Mind you, they have a cartoon movie of the movie that they made. We all know DC is going through some things. But I also like comics because it really allows you to delve into dark things. So I don't know if you guys know this, but on Wikipedia, there is literally a list of all the people who have ever been raped. That's right, guys. I said raped. Who have ever been raped in a Marvel comic. And there are a lot more people on that list than you would think. Even surprisingly, Nightwing is on that list. I was like, what? And surprisingly, there are men on that list. And right now, I know rape is a very hot topic in America, especially because you have a lot of women who are speaking out against men who have used their power to coerce them, and about men who have hurt them. There are also men who have come out to talk about themselves being harassed and sexually and sometimes raped. So for it to find its way into comics, which most people would say kind of exemplifies, again, a break from reality. It's like, why is rape finding its way into, our break from reality? We don't want to be hurt. We want to see, exceptional people doing exceptional things and saving the day. When in actuality, these superheroes, these X-Men, these mutants, they are actually a way for us to see ourselves in a different light. And so a lot of people will say, if they're talking about the X-Men, they're like, X-Men have been, an analog for basically any discriminated group ever, right? So mind you, gosh, guys, my mind's going mad in a minute because comic books just have so many weird things going on with them. There's actually a comic where, a very old Superman comic where he almost does a pornographic movie. Yeah, I said that right. There's also one where Lois Lane actually gets changed into a black woman, right? And I know that gives you pause. It gave me pause when I first read about it, and then I went and found it. But yeah, it's some magic box she gets into, changes her black, and then she has to live as a black woman for I think it's something like a week or something. And she, at the time, she is engaged to Superman. And so, as she's still a black woman, she's like, would you still marry me if I was black? And he just doesn't answer. He just doesn't say anything. And she ends up changing back. So I'm like, okay. But, I did that just to lighten the mood, guys. But getting back to the reason why rape appears in comics. So in the history of comics, when they first came out, there was a whole council that was there to say what could and couldn't be in, comics. And this is really, it's not so different now, but it's not strict, right? It's kind of like back then. It's kind of like how the FCC is now, right? Oh, you can't cuss, you can't do this because the radio is free and people, haven't opted in to hear that message, and, the whole 9 yards. And that was the message of the Comics Council, and the whole thing was, you can't have swears. The bad guys are bad guys and they have to lose. The heroes have to win. You can't make the police look bad. You can't the characters can't be over sexualized and yada, everything that follows with that. After it was repealed, ooh, bless me. After they stopped requiring those requirements of comic books, stories became more robust and more interesting, and more because of the shock value, because people had never seen those things happen in comics, they were put in. So the instance where Batman himself had been raped, depending on the continuity, right? So in the 90s cartoon series, also in the comics, I believe, so he has a son, Damian, with Ra's al Ghul's daughter. And depending on the continuity, she drugs him, he passes out, a man and a woman find themselves in a precarious situation, and she rapes him, and she gets pregnant with Damian and goes back off to, hide in the mountains with her father. And in the other continuity, they purposely, got into this scenario together. And so the issue is, why would there need to be a scenario where Batman needs to be drugged, right? I mean, Batman he's not a hermit, but he's not, out here like getting laid all the time. So it's like, why would there be an instance where he needed to be put in that situation? And I think it happens because it shows a vulnerability, and I do like it because there are actually superheroes in comics now that are homosexual, and so a lot of times there's actually two analog characters for Batman and Superman. It's called Apollo and the Midnighter, and they're a couple. And Apollo, who is the analog for for Superman, which was brought in from a comics company that was bought out by Marvel, DC, which was bought out by the company. He gets raped, right? But like he's homosexual, so it's like, oh, homosexual man gets raped. But the fact that Batman was raped by a woman, I mean, she's a super, she's an assassin. She's very good at what she does, right? So it's not super surprising, but it is that, Batman, one of the most intelligent, non-super or mutated superheroes that we have, kind of gets taken advantage of. It makes us feel vulnerable through him. And I think that's why I like all the dark bits, right? Because me personally, I don't like to ignore the dark part of myself. I like to look at it and analyze and say, why are you this way? You know what I mean? Is this like really going to help us? And if it's not going to, help us, we got to move on. We got to do something different. Whereas other people want to ignore it. And when you read it or see it in comics, it's like, yeah, it makes you get more into it because it feels more real. It feels like these characters are not just here to be exceptional and to be someone I look up to. They're people themselves. Especially, Batman, he doesn't have superpowers. He's just a guy who ended up in a unfortunate, his parents were killed when he was a child, and that shaped his whole life going forward from there. And I think that we all kind of forget that we would get bored if things were perfect. If, me personally, reading some of the storylines of Superman from his beginnings, I'm kind of like, this is a useless, if you are part of any fandom or particular movie series or book series or video game, that like I'm part of SPN family. Woo! Supernatural, love it. I think it's great. I really think it should end, but it is still great. Still love me some Sam and Dean. But when the show first started, there was a monster of the week, right? The brothers drove around the Impala until, someone called them and said, oh, or they came across something weird, a cold spot in a house, or there's a colloquial, haunted house, dark house on the hill, and they go and they hunt a monster and they kill it. Right. And the thing is that that's interesting for a while, right? Because you're learning like the lore, you're learning what's possible, what's not possible. Like in the supernatural storyline, there's no such thing in the continuity of that story, in their reality. There's no such thing as werewolves. Like werewolves are just berserkers. They don't grow like wolf hair. Their own body hair grows, yes, but they don't grow wolf hair. They're not related to wolves. They're just people who have gone berserk. We're learning about wendigos and stuff like that. It's interesting, but the thing is that can only go on for so long before you just don't care anymore, right? And so stories where everything is tied up in a bow are boring, and of course there are story arcs. There's Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's six book serials where it's like a tangent storyline off the main storyline, but there's only so much of that will pique your interest or keep you interested if you're not already invested, right? And so a lot of the comics now, they're kind of shaping themselves to be more interesting to people, or younger crowds, because those are the people who are going to go to the movies and buy merchandise and buy the comics so that they can follow the storyline. But I think it's the people who are not just reading it because it's like, oh man, yeah, Superman, so cool with his flips and his, spider webs and, his witty one-liners, who are like, man, Spider-Man has lost a lot. He's, of course, almost all superheroes have died multiple times, but have been brought back because we want to read about them. But, no, if your average reader is not looking at the deeper story, is this story worth telling? That's my biggest thing. The dark parts, the stuff that gets left or is hiding in the dark corners of the gutter in comics is what really interests me. It's what's not being said that is what really keeps me reading comics. So we're coming to the end of the show, guys. I had so much fun talking about all the dark things with you. If you guys want to let me know what you think about the dark corners, or what your favorite dark thing left in the gutter of a comic is, please, you can leave me an email at xphunterlee@gmail.com. You can DM me on Instagram. You can also check out our YouTube and, again, the Instagram or Pinterest for extra content, aka our new upcoming video segment called Questing, where we go out and try to get some XP for discovering hidden things and checking out loot. If you have a suggestion for a comic or video game or some kind of premise that you would like me to discuss, send me a message. I love joining up with people. And remember, I am your companion, your frenemy, and sometimes love interest, Lee. And we should get to know each other. So don't forget to check out the challenges on the Pinterest or the Instagram. This week, I think I'm going to set the challenge as go find a hidden place in your immediate neighborhood. So when I say that, I mean within like a 15-mile radius. Find some place that you have never seen before, that you didn't even know existed. Go there, have an experience, take a picture, send it to me, and let me know. I will definitely give you a shout out on the next episode and, give you some XP. If you're not all caught up on challenges, I think the last challenge was for you guys to create a character sheet. So that's a way for you to kind of see each other, hang out, talk, tell us about your escapades in tabletop, video games, comics, or whatnot. You have been listening to XP Hunter on WBCA LP 102.9 FM Boston. I will see you guys again next time. In the meantime, do it for the XP, guys. Bye.